Sean Barnard, Sixers insider. Tough day for the Sixers fans, man. Tough day.
Yeah, I wish I was in higher spirits for this one, but whatever. Got to fight through it. Got to show up and push through. So it is what it is.
Embiid not happy with the Sixers fans. It felt like Knicks Nation was in the building.
Yeah, I think he's right about that. People are going to jump on his neck down that because of that quote. But I mean, it was 4 straight Knicks home games that we've seen so far. And it is pretty embarrassing to be seeing that at the Wells Fargo Arena. Hearing Jalen Brunson MVP chants at the Wells Fargo Center did personally bother me and hurt the heart a little bit to see that. So it sucks. It does.
Yeah. For you, it definitely sucks. For Knicks Nation, it's great. But I do want to talk about Brunson erupting for 47. It seems like he's figured things out over the past couple games. Is there anything the Sixers could have done differently?
Yeah, I mean, I do think Nick Nurse, I'm a little bit more critical than I think I've seen the vast majority of Nick Nurse, specifically for the handling of the series. I think that he kind of overcorrected things. That when you look at the first 2 games of that series, their strategy was very clearly, we're not letting Jalen Brunson beat us, and we're challenging the others to be the case. And we saw Josh Hart explode, knock down a number of 3-pointers, Dante DiVincenzo playing very well. Feels like the overcorrection has come with, we're now going to let Brunson get his and believe that he can't carry the team to a victory. And that just purely is the case that he can do that. So I do think a lot of it was, some of this is just Jalen Brunson obviously playing better than he did at the start, that he's too good a player to shoot as poorly as he did to start this series. He's definitely getting more comfortable, getting Embiid in space more often. And it's just been frustrating that I feel like they've allowed it to happen more than should have been the case.
Yeah, I mean, him scoring 47 isn't good for the Sixers, but I do feel like it's so much more than that when it comes to the Sixers loss. I feel like they're not making enough championship plays. And when I say championship plays, I'm talking about rebounding. I'm talking about 50-50 balls. Is that their personnel? Is that the heart? Is that their effort? Is it the coaching? Like, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, rebounding is number one reason why, specifically today and really the series as a whole, that the Josh Hart, like, back-breaking type rebounds is really the difference here. And I mean, that's been a struggle. This was a battle that we knew going in, that the Knicks are a team that crashed the glass like crazy. And this has been a weakness of the Sixers, that even with Joel Embiid, like, Joel's a guy that, despite being 7 foot tall and constantly averaging double-digit rebounds, he's not a guy that I would consider a particularly great rebounder. Like, he doesn't have the instinct of a rebounder. He's just big and has size. And that's even more maximized when he can't really jump right now or really have the mobility to fight. So that's a factor. Tobias Harris, who would be number 2 in this pecking order, is another guy who isn't really known for his physicality or getting up and getting the tough rebounds in the way we see these Knicks teams being so good at. And then beyond that, like Kyle Lowry, not a huge frame there. Tyrese Maxey, not a huge frame there. So the Knicks have absolutely made it a focus. They're benefiting from it. I think some of it is just kind of personnel, and that's something that needs to be addressed moving forward. But it's absolutely like heartbreaking. The Knicks had a 73% offensive rebound rate when Isaiah Hartenstein was off the floor, meaning in most cases that Precious Achiuwa was the tallest guy on the floor. That just can't happen if you're the Sixers. It just has to be better than that.
So before the series, I did think the Knicks would win this one, Sean, and a lot of it was because the Knicks were playing great. It was great flow and rhythm without Randall, even though Randall's a great player. I thought Joel's knee buckling after he came back, that wasn't a good look. I didn't think he was moving too great. I mean, he dropped 50 at one point in this series, so, it is what it is. I do think he's, there's somewhat of a risk for what he's doing right now in terms of playing, but he has to play at this point, right? Especially, you're a Sixers fan, you know that. And I didn't think Tyrese Maxey had enough experience, because for them to win, he probably has to be the number 1 guy at this point. And then I just don't know about the Sixers' depth. Like, I don't know if they're making enough shots. Tobias is not shooting enough shots. I think he only shot 1 3-pointer this game.
Yep.
Do the Sixers, is it even a fair ask for the Sixers to win this series with Joel's health, Maxey being a younger player, and them not, it seems like they don't have too much depth?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a bizarre year for the Sixers. When thinking about, like, the start of the season, we were still doing the James Harden dance. And like PJ Tucker started multiple games for this Sixers team this year, and that feels like forever ago. So there's been a lot of changing bodies. I think as a core, like, this unit hasn't had a ton of time to play together. Like, guys like Kyle Lowry, for example, he came to the Sixers team when Joel Embiid was injured. So they really only got a handful of games to play together before having to go on this postseason run. So I think things haven't clicked the way that we fully hoped. The talent level is absolutely a factor. And, like, he kind of skates by in a lot of these, but to call a spade, like Tobias Harris is making 28% of the salary cap and is a guy who really doesn't have a defining trait for why he's necessary to this team. So I think it's unfortunate the way the bracket shook out, that I truly do believe the Sixers and the Knicks are the second and third best teams in the Eastern Conference. And I think that very easily either one of these teams would be comfortable dealing with the Cavs, the Magic, the Pacers, the Bucks, any of those type of matchups. So I think it's unfortunate it is what it is, but it's a testament to the Knicks. They are the real deal. Jalen Brunson is the truth, and they're just winning this series in the margins and outworking the Sixers team.
Tobias Harris, I've heard boos from Sixers fans. 1-3 tonight. Are Sixers fans absolutely done with Tobias at this point?
Yeah, and I do think the feeling's mutual, that I think Tobias is ready to set his sights on other pastures as well. To an extent, I feel bad for the guy that he's seen his role change drastically throughout his time with the Sixers. There's been moments where he's been looked at as the number 2 option. There's been moments where he's kind of reduced to a 3-and-D kind of role player. None
Yeah.
of it has really been like the natural version of himself. But on the other side of things, like, he's straight up not been good. Like, this season specifically, I would probably argue has been his worst stretch of basketball. And it's not effort stuff. Like, he is trying, he is competing, but they just need him to be able to hit shots, generate offense in a way that he hasn't been capable. He's not that great of a defender on the other side of the floor either. He tries, but like, he's vulnerable in certain spots. So it's just been frustrating. He just was never the right fit for this team, and frankly got a contract paid out from that his talent level was never capable of cashing.
Yeah, I feel like the reason he got paid, and good for him, man, I'm happy he got paid, was because
Sure.
that 3-and-D archetype was so coveted in a time when you really need specialists. And we're seeing now with like the Nuggets, you really need like more read and react type players than specialists at this point.
Yeah, and he also just struck at the right time when thinking of the context of the Sixers made their all-in push for Jimmy Butler and Tobias Harris. So they traded all the young guys, the draft picks. Those were their all-in moves. Butler wanted no part of coming back, which is a whole larger conversation. So he was already finding his way down to South Beach, that he was beefing with Ben Simmons. So you couldn't let both these guys walk for the context of you just went all in for these moves. So he struck iron when it was hot at the right time. Testament to him. Shout out to his agent for getting him the money he did. But yeah, the Tobias Harris experience has certainly worn out. It's welcome in Philadelphia.
You know, Mitch got high praise for guarding Joel. Game 1, OG switches off on him today in game 4. And I mean, obviously, they're great defenders. They did a great job. But how much of that is the injury, in your opinion? Because I've dealt with my own knee surgeries. And when you're playing against great defenders, it's not only that you're playing against that great defender, you're also playing against your body in a lot of ways. And you don't really trust that knee all the way.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, that's been the bigger battle for Joel. Is there's moments where it feels like he doesn't trust the knee or some of those cuts and turns, and you can't argue with the guy. You have to understand where he's coming from. That's one of those like learning to play through it types of things. I was surprised it took until today to see the OG on Embiid matchup. That I think, like, in general, he struggles more with those type of archetypes of matchups. When you throw like a true big man on him, he's capable of having his way. And I think teams get too comfortable trying to match up from a size standpoint. He struggles way more when you get a guy like OG who's just going to make you work, going to fight, be physical with you. And that's what happened today. And then on top of that, I really also disagreed with the decision by Nick Nurse to play Embiid straightforward the entire second half there. He just didn't have a ton in the tank going down the stretch. That's the first time in his entire career that he's played an entire half straight through. And I get, like, part of the playoffs, that's a button that coaches push, is obviously play your stars more. That's just not a button that should be in Joel Embiid's vicinity there. One of the limitations that he has is obviously his size, and this is all coming back from the knee injury and the fitness level that he's at, all those things. So I do think it was mismanaged to allow him to play all the way through without at least getting him like a 2-minute break here.
So, I mean, depth is an issue. Can you touch on how you feel Nick Nurse could actually practically make those decisions and change those lineups moving forward in the series?
I would have loved for them to embrace a little more 5-out basketball and just try and run in a way that a guy like Ricky Council IV, who I understand is a rookie, even a guy like KJ Martin, like, these are players that can provide a spark. Like, energy guys can absolutely swing a playoff game. And it has been a little frustrating to me, like, Nick Nurse didn't play that card whatsoever, that you didn't lean into that. And again, like, we're kind of grasping at straws. You are taking a shot in the dark here, but I'd rather go down swinging than essentially just trying what we already kind of know wasn't fully working out for the Sixers team. So I would have loved to play a little full 5-out, go small ball, run with KJ Martin, Ricky Council IV, and they're at least guys who would leave it all out on the floor in a way that I would have liked to see today.
Any other keys you see for this team? Like, do they still have a chance, in your opinion?
I don't think they probably win 3 in a row. I do think they'll give a little bit of a fight. I think it's likely that they win game 5 and push it. I mean, frankly, the series is closer than a 3-1 deficit would indicate. That each of these games have come right down to the wire. This has been, in my opinion, the best first round matchup from a game to game standpoint. That it's been some really awesome hoops. So I still think they have a puncher's chance, but they need a ton to go right. And frankly, like if we're being realistic, I think the time bomb ticking on Embiid's body is not a great thing for the Sixers team. That if he can't like produce at the MVP level that they need him to, this team just can't run with this next team on a game by game basis. And that's why we're seeing the limitations of this team.
Are those concerns limited to this year, or Sixers fans, even front office, coaching, his teammates? Is there really concerns for the future of the organization when it comes to Joel?
It's interesting. He's very private about a lot of the medical stuff that like the obviously inside the facility they have a better idea than we have. Like we still have only kind of pieced together what type of surgery that he had that has never formally been announced by the team. And it's like that with everything. I mean, same example with the Bell's palsy. Like this was an issue which it was clear something was going on. We all could tell that. And the days leading up to that, every question about Joel and Nick Nurse is, so is there anything going on with Joel Embiid's eye? And it's just like, no, it's completely fine. And it's like, we just know that's not the case. Can we just be open here? So I am curious what the conversation is behind the scenes. It's definitely a concern from my eyes. Like, I think you approach next season with a straight up plan of forget going for MVP, forget trying to get the 65 games, put the full focus on make sure this guy is ready for the playoffs. Personally, I think I would really consider only playing him home games that like don't take the risk of make sure you're minimizing him throughout the season because it's the same story. We have not seen a healthy Joel Embiid playoff run, and we see how good he is at this version of himself. I just want to see him at 100% of himself on the biggest stage.
The home game thing is interesting. Do you think a team could build enough chemistry when a player is only playing 41 games for the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think you can work it better than like was the case this year, where essentially like they were very clearly and wisely like building up an offense the way that the flow was, adding things on a week by week basis, the chemistry and the off ball cutting, and then when Embiid went down for those 2 months, like the offensive playbook right now looks so much less creative than it did at the start of the year when they were playing together. And again, as I mentioned, a lot of that comes with these pieces being swapped during the period that Joel was out, during the trade deadline, guys coming in and out, those types of things. I think they could do it. I mean, the key here, of course, is the story of the Sixers team is attacking the cap space this summer. So you have to get another guy that can essentially help this team stay afloat alongside Tyrese Maxey. I know the Paul George rumors are there. A guy like that, and we'll see what ultimately happens out in LA before we even have those conversations. But I think if you can add a player of that sort of caliber, have him run with Maxey as kind of a game by game, like every night, that guy, that Joel can come in and make a difference. And he's been a guy, I think it is possible if you do it right, I guess, to sum it up.
Yeah, I wonder if you're a guy like Paul George, who has been linked to the Knicks as well, even the Indiana Pacers as well. If he looks at Joel's injury history and that causes him to hesitate a little bit playing for this team.
Yeah, I mean, it's a possible. It depends what Paul George wants. And I do think the Sixers are going to come in with heavy pockets. That's going to be their tactic. That a lot of, for all the criticism that Daryl Morey has taken for this team, a lot of his moves to this point were essentially undoing past wrongs. The Ben Simmons contract, the Tobias Harris contract. Like, this is finally the summer where he can actually build the roster that he sees fit. So now's where we can kind of judge from here. And I do expect him to come in swinging, looking for some big names.
Daryl Morey has always been the guy that like focuses on the math, and some people believe there's not enough emotion involved. Like you're actually dealing with people. Have you seen that as well? And how big of a weakness is that for Daryl Morey?
It's definitely notable and a fair criticism. Probably the Pat Bev trade would be something that I think is a pretty clear example of it. Is he was a guy that was beloved in the locker room, in the city, and Pat Bev was kind of open about him speaking like, we're not planning on trading you. And then all of a sudden, right before the deadline, campaigning a second round pick, here we come. Now, if you just want to look at this from the basketball perspective, that was a fair value there. And especially knowing that Kyle Lowry was likely coming, that's a deal that makes sense for the Sixers team. That you added a second rounder, and campaign has been fine. That he's been a nice spark and had some nights where he's looked good. And I think Kyle Lowry is just straight up better than Pat Bev for what this team needed to that context. So it's definitely a fair criticism. It makes me a little nervous how many guys have kind of said things public. We saw the James Harden stuff, Pat Bev with a couple quotes. So I don't love that narrative seems to be growing a little bit, but ultimately, like, if he's making the right call and making the right choices, I'm still going to judge him fair on that.
I think he's pretty good at his job at the end of the day. I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. You mentioned James Harden. How has it been for you? Playoff James is in full effect, man. Maybe he really is the system. Maybe.
Yeah, he looked good today. And I'll be honest, going through the James Harden experience here, like I don't have a hatred for James Harden. Like when Ben Simmons left, that's still a guy that leaves a sour taste in my mouth. The James Harden stuff was like it was worth a shot. It was worth trying. It just wasn't quite the answer for us or him. And whatever those conversations were between Daryl Morey and James Harden will ultimately decide who was right in the context of a lot of those things. The bottom line is he wanted to get paid, and the Sixers weren't willing to give him that sort of dollar amount. So it's been fun watching him LA. I feel bad for the Kawhi stuff. I think James Harden's the guy that I do prefer to watch from afar rather than like zeroed in on an every night basis for sure.
You're watching it from afar, but are you surprised with how consistent he's been in these playoffs? Because, the narrative around him is that he's very inconsistent. We've seen it with the Sixers in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, he has his games. Like he will have his games where he shoots you into and shoots you out of games. And the interesting part about like James Harden is I think even on a team in which he's not the best player, he still impacts how far that team will go more than anything because he is the engine of an offense. He is the guy making every sort of read, and he is so intelligent as a basketball mind with some of these, whether you're
Yeah.
playmaking, whether you are creating your own shot. He's a brilliant basketball IQ. But I do think like you are fully riding and buckled up to the James Harden experience for how many of those step back threes are ultimately falling.
How have you made of? I mean, man, I had the Bucks coming out the East, Sean. It's not looking good. But hey, what? I mean, everybody's injured. It's not my fault, right? Like,
True.
what have you made of Doc Rivers since he's left the Sixers? We see his media career, and now, how do you feel about him coaching this team? It feels like he gets a lot of heat for always having excuses, always having alibis, and all sorts of things.
And deservingly so. That Doc Rivers falls more into the Ben Simmons category of that there is a
Okay.
hatred there, that there is some frustrating. And I can speak to that. I had a chance to do a bunch of the just pregame, postgame interviews from the media side of things during Doc's tenure, and he is a guy who very much carries himself with the I just know more basketball than everyone in this room
Oh,
combined.
really?
And
Really?
and yeah, and that definitely he also would very much have a revisionist history on a lot of this stuff. That there were times where he would go back, have some verbal spars with a couple reporters in the room that like I just didn't really appreciate the tone of the way that he came off. And on top of that, there's plenty of material for the letdowns that this guy has had. Frankly, I'm very disappointed by the Giannis and Dame injuries, more
Yeah.
so from the side of things that like I think that team was leaking oil before then. This is a perfect excuse right on the platter of Doc Rivers. I think that team was not gelling and heading down. I mean, they would below 500 record with Doc Rivers at the helm is it's hard to do to take over a team that's 30-17 and not find a way to win 50 games, but he did it.
Yeah, I'm not making excuses, but hey, what could Combo do? Combo had the Bucks coming out the East. Everybody's injured. There's nothing I could do. So all I could say, they would have came out the East if these guys didn't get injured. But the Lakers do get a win. And I have to ask you, like everything always, unfortunately, and I realize this, I tried to stay away from it for so long, but the LeBron MJ stuff, everybody loves it. Everybody wants to talk about it. How important was it for LeBron James to get at least one win and not get swept? Because, the Michael Jordan people, which unfortunately, this is what it is. It's the LeBron James people and the Michael Jordan people. Nobody can appreciate both of them, right? How
Yeah.
important was it for LeBron to win just one game here? At
It's
least one
fun.
game.
Yeah, it's funny because like my personal opinion is like not at all. Like I ultimately don't think they're coming back in that series. But then
Right.
again, like that absolutely would be a bullet point thrown in this conversation for the history of time if he was swept by this Denver team. Frankly, I thought that series was over in game two when that was a performance in which LeBron himself and that Lakers team gave everything that they wanted. They every look was clean, the execution looked great, and it still was not enough to take down that Nuggets team. And then the game winner by Jamal Murray, Anthony Davis getting tackled into the bench. That to me was like one of those, like they brought it, they gave everything they had, and it's just straight up not good enough. So it's a tough matchup. If it was something like a Lakers Thunder first round series, I really would have thought hard about picking the Lakers in that matchup. The Nuggets, they're just the real deal. They're very good, and they look like they're hitting that stride once again this year. So I'm not holding LeBron to the fire too much on that one.
You mentioned OKC and you know a lot about James Harden, and James Harden started his career in OKC. Do you see the Jalen Williams thing becoming a little bit like the James Harden thing where he's just going to become too good and somebody's going to kind of just pay the man and he won't end up being with SGA forever? Like that's how I see it. Like, because he's really good. There's even an
Yeah.
outside chance that he becomes better than James Harden or SGA. Like that's how good this guy is.
Yeah, he truly is. And that's a guy that I personally missed the mark on from an evaluation standpoint coming out of college. That I was skeptical that how much on ball that he did back in his Santa Clara days would translate directly to the NBA. And turns out he's just straight enough, good enough to do it. again at this level. So yeah, I'm curious. It does seem like, I mean, that like just locker room looks awesome. How tight knit all those guys are, how young, all the barking that they're doing and everything. So I think there's a chance that from a mental side of things, like he's not cut in the same James Harden way that I think James always had a chip on his shoulder of, I want to be recognized as the best player. We'll see what makes this guy tick, but I totally agree. He's absolutely a future all-star and
Yeah.
closer to the upper echelon of that conversation, if anything.
All right, a little bit of rapid fire before we get out of here, Sean. We might as well start here since I said everybody loves this LeBron Jordan debate. LeBron or Jordan?
I'm a Jordan guy, and I can't argue with the long term of LeBron here. It is changing my mind a little bit that it's so much with like everything's like LeBron's doing this at age 38 or doing this at almost 40. Like, stop at what LeBron's just doing. Just as a pure basketball perspective, it's ridiculous. But I am kind of dug into the Jordan take, although I am wavering a little bit.
Blake Griffin recently retired. Hall of Famer, fact or fiction?
I say fact there.
Okay. Who wins Game 5? Sixers versus Knicks.
Sixers win it. I think they give us one more to just kind of keep the hopes up a little and go down with a fight, but I don't know if they crawl all the way back.
Brunson's 47 or Embiid's 50?
Embiid's 50. That Embiid doing it the way he does on the defensive side of the floor, I still don't think he gets enough credit for. It was a real deal, 50 points. I'm going Joel Embiid for the two-way impact in the game as a whole.
Who's the biggest threat to the Celtics?
It would be the Knicks. It would be the winner of this Knicks and Sixers series. I truly believe they're the second and third best teams in the East. Looks like the Knicks have kind of painted the red carpet for themselves, so I still think it's New York.
Favorite basketball movie?
Hoosiers.
Okay. Favorite cereal?
Lucky Charms.
Who wins the NBA championship this year?
Denver Nuggets repeat. I do think that it is the case. It feels open this year, but at the same time, when having those conversations, it's like I just think Denver's at a level where no one else is. So I think they do run it back, and I've been impressed with some of these guys stepping up, the Peyton Watsons of the world that look ready to take that next step.
Best player in the world not named Jokic?
Joel Embiid. It is absolutely Joel Embiid.
Wait, you might think he's better than Jokic.
My take here has pretty consistently been Joel Embiid at his peak is the best player in the world, but his valleys are for sure much lower than Nikola Jokic. That I think when Embiid is at the best version of himself, the two-way impact, dominating on both sides, I don't think Jokic touches that top end. But again, the variance in Joel is significantly higher than Jokic. That there will be games of Embiid that is far worse than anything that Jokic could produce.
Well, we could have a whole other podcast, a whole other day, all about that for half an hour or 40 minutes. But today's show was great. Sean, you know you're always welcome back on the show. Let everybody know where we can find you on social media and everywhere else.
Yeah, appreciate you having me. Always good chopping it up. And you guys can follow me on Twitter at Sean_Barnard1. You can catch me on the Fox Sports Philadelphia airwaves talking about everything going on here. So we'll be back in action, breaking everything down tomorrow. Also, check out Pick Swap Media and Sixers Digest on YouTube. So my own little personal challenge growing off there as well.
Sean, you're always welcome back on the show and talk soon.
Absolutely. Appreciate it.